Hello, and welcome to the Robert Stogner Show. I have Forest Productions, Zombie Apocalypse, Future Chronicle.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. The Center for Disease Control has reported an outbreak of a new virus that affects the brain and regenerates dead tissue, prolonging life after clinical death. Please remain calm and listen to the radio or TV for official news updates. Stay indoors and maintain protective measures until notified by the media or public safety. You are advised to minimize contact with all outside surfaces. Avoid droplets and residues. Remove contaminated clothing as soon as possible and place in a sealed plastic bag. Wash exposed skin with soap and water and shampoo hair. If exposure is known or suspected, report to the nearest medical facility as directed by public health officials for evaluation and treatment. Inform the staff you may be contaminated. It is important to stay calm. Although local and government authorities have responded to the outbreak, there may still be dangers. What seems like a safe distance or location may not be. Unless told to evacuate, avoid roads to allow emergency. Please stand by for an action message from your local authorities.
A widespread rise of zombies hostile to human life engages in the general assault on civilization. The victims of zombies may become zombies themselves if they are bitten by other zombies or if a zombie-creating virus travels like a disease in the general population. Could this happen today? Well, roughly 100 years ago, during the flu epidemic of 1918, 500 million people were infected, and between 50 and 100 million died. Just look at the SARS epidemic. It took the CDC to a new level of awareness. It would have been worse than the flu. A virus would overwhelm containment efforts, and a high population centers like New York and Los Angeles would conceivably fall in a day or less, with the rest of the country following. There are several zombie-like diseases and poisons that could combine and somehow create this scenario. Rabies. Rabies is a preventable viral disease of animals, most often transmitted through the bite of a rabid animal. The vast majority of rabies cases reported to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, each year occur in wild animals like raccoons, skunks, bats, and fox. The rabies virus infects the central nervous system, ultimately causing disease in the brain and death. In early symptoms of rabies in people are similar to that of many other illnesses, including fever, headache, general weakness, or discomfort. As disease progresses, more specific symptoms appear and may include insomnia, anxiety, confusion, slight or partial paralysis, excitation, hallucinations, agitation, and hypersalivation, an increase in saliva, difficulty swallowing, and hydrophobia, fear of water. Death usually occurs within days of most onset of these symptoms. Poisons. What are they? There are certain kinds of poisons that slow your body functions to the point you'll be considered dead, even to a doctor. The poison from the fugu, a Japanese blowfish, can do this. The victims can be brought back under effects of a drug like datura stramonium or other chemicals called alkaloids that leave them in a trance-like state with no memory, but still able to perform simple tasks like eating, sleeping, moaning, and shambling around with their arms outstretched. This stuff has happened in Haiti. That's where the word zombie comes from. There are books about it, the most famous one by Dr. Wade Davis, a virus that turned human beings into mindless killing machines. In real life, we have a series of brain disorders that do the same thing. They were never contagious, of course. Then mad cow disease came along. It attacks the cow's spinal cord and brain, turning it into a stumbling, mindless attack cow. How it can result in zombies when mad cow gets into humans. It creates changes in gait, that's walking, hallucinations, lack of coordination, for example, stumbling and falling, muscle twitches, myoclonic jerks or seizures, rapidly developing delirium, and dementia. Chances this could cause the zombie apocalypse. If the whole sudden mindless violence idea seems far-fetched, remember that you're just one brain chemical, serotonin, away from turning into a mindless killing machine. They've tested it by putting it in rats in deathmatch style cages and watched them turn on each other. All it would take is a disease that destroys the brain's ability to absorb that one chemical, and suddenly it's real world 28 days later. Night of the Living Dead, real zombie attacks that actually are happening. Now, some real-life zombie attacks. In August 2016, a 19-year-old college student, Austin Haroff, reportedly stormed away from a restaurant in Jupiter, Florida, where he'd been dining with his parents, apparently upset over the slow service there. He then wandered into a neighborhood where a couple, Michelle Milshin and John Stevens III, sat in their garage with the door open, enjoying a quiet evening. Haroff pulled a switchblade on the couple and stabbed them to death, apparently without provocation. A neighbor attempted to intervene and called 911, but was stabbed by the man as well. When the police arrived, they found Haroff naked, ripping away chunks of the couple's flesh and eating it. He was also growling, grunting, and making animal noises. Repeated use of a stun gun and a police dog could not sway Haroff from his meal. Finally, 3 officers had to pull the man away from the bodies by force. On May 26, 2012, Rudy Eugene stripped naked and attacked a homeless man, Ronald Popo, eating about 80% of the man's face. When the police arrived at the scene, they were forced to open fire on the belligerent Eugene. He took far more bullets than his body should have been able to withstand before finally dropping. It was originally theorized that Eugene had ingested bath salts or even PCP, but toxicology reports revealed only a trace amount of marijuana in his system, leaving the explanation for this zombie-like attack on Popo a mystery. nodding disease of northern Uganda. For several months in 2012, a veritable plague swept through the northern regions of Uganda. It was dubbed the nodding disease, giving the afflicted children tendency to nod their heads as though in a trance. However, this nodding was perhaps the most innocuous symptom of the disease. Children were reported to be mostly unresponsive, to suffer from seizures, to wander off aimlessly, in several cases start random fires. Parents who attempted to tie their children down often left with the horrific scene, their young ones snarling and biting at their binds, attempting to free themselves. While nodding disease is not an example of supposed death and resurrection, the behavior it elicits from those infected sounds very much like zombification. Sleeping sickness turns victims into zombies. Sleeping disease runs rampant in African countries, affecting tens of thousands yearly. It is described by Professor Sanjeev Krishna of St. George University of London as such. At first, it will cause headaches, aching muscles, and maybe itching. But in the late stages, when the parasite have invaded the brain, the signs become more obvious and ominous. Victims find it hard to concentrate. They become irritable, their speech is slurred, and they stop eating. Their daily rhythm becomes disrupted to such an extent that they can't sleep at night and find it almost impossible to stay awake during the day. It even becomes very hard for them to do simple mental tasks, such as drawing a straight line. This is an infection that carries nightmarish qualities, reducing many of its victims to a zombie-like state before they go into a coma and die.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share, like, and tweet me. Anything on Spreaker is greatly appreciated.